We are here to approach the authentic, the substantial, and the truthful, to follow our inner calling, to invoke our deepest selves, and more than this. We are here to encounter the divine in ourselves, the sacred in one another, and to find a connection with the holy in all things. May we be calm in action and in thought. May we find patience and stillness as we settle back from our individual pace of task and responsibility and find instead a gentler pace which emerges within us and emerges from this gathering together. As we enter into stillness and quiet, may we find a gentleness that reassures us, a grace that is familiar, a tenderness that confirms that hope is coming. Hope is among us, right here and right now. These words adapted from a prayer by Joe James. Welcome all who have gathered this morning for our Sunday service. Welcome to those of you who are here in the building in Essex Church. Welcome to everyone who's joining us via Zoom from far and wide, and indeed watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast at a later date. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Jane Blackall and I'm minister with Kensington Unitarians. This morning's service is titled Living in Hope, a theme that was suggested by our very own Patricia Brewerton, who will be sharing her own personal reflections on this theme later in the service. In the face of troubling world events and often tough personal circumstances, it is all too easy to sink into hopelessness and despair. So in the next hour, we're going to reflect on those ways in which we might find authentic hope, wise hope, without resorting to false optimism or giving in to the temptation of denial about the reality of what we're facing, both individually and collectively, right in this moment. As the theologian Jim Wallace has written, hope is a spiritual and even religious choice. Hope is not a feeling, it is a decision. And the decision for hope is based on what you believe at the deepest levels, what your most basic convictions about the world and what the future holds. You choose hope not as a naive wish, but as a choice, with your eyes wide open to the reality of the world. So let's begin as we always do. Let's light our chalice flame. It's a moment for us to pause, a moment for us to arrive, and settle within ourselves. Maybe lay down any aggravation that we picked up on our way in this morning. This is a simple ritual that connects us with Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists the world over, and it connects us with that proudly progressive religious tradition of which this gathering is part. We light this chalice, symbol of our faith, to honour the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who have laboured for justice, and the love of those who have built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope. May it inspire us to do likewise. Time for us to sing now. Our first hymn is in your purple books if you're in the building, number 43, Gather the Spirit. If you're joining via Zoom, the words will be up on screen for all the hymns today. Feel free to stand or sit as you prefer, and let's sing up as best we can, Gather the Spirit. So let's take all of those joys and concerns, both spoken and unspoken, into an extended time of prayer now. This prayer is based on some words by Christine Green. You might want to adjust your position to get more comfortable. You might want to close your eyes. Perhaps there's a position that helps you to feel more centred and prayerful. Whatever works for you, whatever helps you get into the right state of body and mind, to be present to yourself, to each other, and to that which lies within us and beyond us. Spirit of life, God of all love, in whom we live and move and have our being, we turn our full attention to you, the light within and without, as we tune into the depths of this life and the greater wisdom to which and through which we are all intimately connected. Be with us now as we allow ourselves to drop into the silence and the stillness at the very centre of our being. Source of truth and goodness, help us to feel you in our breathing in and our breathing out. Quiet our minds, if only for a moment. Still our bodies, if only for a moment. Soothe our souls in this holy moment. When uncertainty pervades, give us rest from worry. When fear rises, give us an inner peace. When pain surfaces, give us balm. Some of our spirits are so weary. Some of our bodies feel quite exhausted. Some of our minds feel frantic and uneasy. Great Spirit, remind us of the cycles of life, so that we might turn towards the dawn, turn towards the thaw, towards rebirth and new hope. And make that hope alive in us. Ignite it so that it may burn brighter than our fear. And may that bright hope shine for others to witness too, that our faith might be a beacon and our love a lamp to shine the way forward. Fill us with gratitude as we turn towards one another in this one human family, knowing that we're never alone on our journey, and always be reminded of that greater love that holds all. And let us take a few quiet moments now to look inward, to get in touch with what's real, what's going on beneath the surface of our lives this morning. Let us notice what it is that we're carrying, what it is that's troubling us, the questions and uncertainties that we are living with, and the hopes that we nurture too. And from that place of realness, of connecting with what's real, silently and inwardly ask for what you most need. Don't fret about who or what it is that you're asking. It might be God. You may be just casting it out into the universe. Even if you are the only one that hears your prayer, be clear on what it is that you need in this moment. And let us also be sure to give thanks for what we already have. Let us look back on the week and recall all of those moments, be they large or small, moments of kindness, of generosity, of comfort, maybe even moments of joy. And let us take time to savour those gifts, to connect with what gratitude we can find, and take in the good. And finally, let us turn outwards, shifting our attention to the world around us, from those who are closest to our heart, to neighbours and strangers, to the wider community that we live within, and stretching ever onward. For we are connected to every living being we share this planet with. So may we hold them all in love. Spirit of life, God of all love, as this time of prayer draws to a close, we offer up our joys and our concerns, our hopes and our fears, our beauty and our brokenness, and we call on you for insight, healing and renewal. As we look forward now to the coming week, help us to live well each day and be our best selves, using our unique gifts in the service of love, justice and peace. Amen. Let us sing again. Our second hymn today is on your hymn sheets if you're in the room. It's a lovely, gentle one, quite an old one. I don't think we've sung this recently, but I think the tune's pretty easy to pick up. A Dream of Widening Love. This reading by Unitarian Universalist minister and Zen teacher James Ford was published very recently on his blog in the context of the current political situation in the US. He writes, Buddhism traditionally hasn't been too enamoured with hope. Pema Chodron critiques the concept of hope as a form of clinging. In her view, hope can create a subtle resistance to the present. Zen suggests that the transformative power of life comes from being fully present in the moment, beyond the dualities of hope and despair, or any other distractions that pull us from our life as it is right now. Lately, I've been re-examining hope, and maybe I need to rename it, like Roshi Joan Halifax has done. In her work on social activism, she often discusses wise hope. She suggests the need for a hope that is not attached to specific outcomes, but that is grounded in compassionate action. She says that wise hope is not seeing things unrealistically, but rather seeing things as they are, including the truth of suffering, both its existence and our capacity to transform it. This wise hope aligns with Zen's emphasis on clear seeing and non-attachment, fostering a hope that supports engagement without delusion. But I have discovered that hope does not lay down easy, and this persistence hints at the irrepressible nature of hope, which can persist even in the most hopeless seeming conditions. This might reflect something fundamental about us messy humans, a yearning for connection, growth, or renewal that refuses to be extinguished. It's not about erasing hope, but transforming it into something wiser, freer, and less entangled. Recently, I read something intriguing that Nick Cave had written on hope. This is what he said. Hope is optimism with a broken heart. Hope has an earned understanding of the sorrowful or corrupted nature of things, yet it rises to attend to the world even still. We understand that our demoralisation becomes the most serious impediment to bettering the world. In its active form, hope is a supreme gesture of love, a radical and audacious duty, whereas despair is a stagnant rejection of life itself. James Ford goes on, these words from Nick Cave resonate deeply. I wonder if Zen does not ask us to abandon hope entirely, but to abandon hope as we commonly understand it, as a wish for a specific outcome, as a tether to things we cannot control. Instead, Zen invites us to embody a deeper and more courageous form, hope with a broken heart. As we sit confronting all the challenges of our current moment, how might we reflect on the ways we can realise this in our practice and in our lives? My friends Erin Segal and Julie Cho have offered this concept of ongoingness. Ongoingness is the practice of letting go of hero narratives, the idea that liberation or change is achieved through singular dramatic acts, and instead focusing on the everyday, collaborative, interconnected efforts that sustain us. They remind us that ease often leads to more action, and even rest can be a form of resistance. Ongoingness reframes liberation as part of a larger story, one that began before us and will continue after us. It emphasises care, connection, and the long view over quick fixes or final victories. So when we shift our understanding of hope to one of ongoingness, it becomes less about yearning for a specific outcome and more about engaging with life as it unfolds. This is the radical heart of Zen, meeting each moment fully, without clinging, and recognising that the act of showing up is itself transformative. So let us meet the new year not with shallow optimism or deep despair, but with the profound clarity and compassion that Zen practice cultivates. And in this way, perhaps hope need not betray us after all. Words from James Ford.
We're moving into a time of meditation now. To take us into stillness, I'm going to share perhaps the most famous poem, On Hope, by Emily Dickinson. The words will take us into a few minutes of shared silence, which will end with the sound of a bell. And then we'll hear some music from Abby and Andrew. So let's do what we need to do to get comfortable. Adjust your position if you need to. Perhaps put your feet flat on the ground to ground yourself. Maybe close your eyes. And as we always say, the words are just an offering. Feel free to use this time to meditate in your own way. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that would abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me. We live in hope, to which the response is often, we die in despair. It's usually used in a flippant way, as in, one day David will learn to shut cupboard doors behind him. I live in hope. But our need for hope is not flippant. We do need to live in hope. And hope is not the same as optimism. I think it's more elusive, more spiritual perhaps. I saw a film in the autumn which reminded me of that poem Emily Dickinson wrote, which begins, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul." I saw the film Bird twice in 1 week and would happily see it again. It tells the story of Bailey, a stroppy 12-year-old tomboy. Andrea Arnold, who made the film, likes to challenge what we mean by disadvantaged, dysfunctional families. So Bailey lives with her dad and brother in a squat, an abandoned office block, while her mother lives in another part of town with an abusive boyfriend and Bailey's 3 younger siblings. You do need to see the film to appreciate the challenge. Our stroppy tomboy, in a fit of pique, runs out of her home and ends up sleeping in the open, where she's wakened in the morning to see a strange young man coming across the field. This is Bird, the other main character in the film. At first, Bailey is suspicious of him, but eventually they become friends, and together they plan to rescue Bailey's mother and siblings from the abusive boyfriend. Unfortunately, things don't turn out as planned, and the boyfriend violently attacks both Bailey and Bird. We see Bird lying on the floor, and then, magically, feathers start to grow on his shoulders, and he starts to turn into a bird, a real bird, and a very large bird. He grabs hold of the boyfriend, and the last we see of him, he is being carried in Bird's talons off into the far distance. Dickinson's poem uses a bird as a metaphor for hope. Hope is like a little bird that sings even in the roughest storm. Hope is a comfort and requires nothing at all from us. Emily Dickinson lived with her family in a prosperous household in New England and was regarded as reclusive and somewhat eccentric. We can imagine her holding hope within her as she sat in her quiet room writing her many poems, which she did not seek to publish. What she hoped for, we do not know, but the mere fact of hoping seems to have given her comfort. But that passive kind of hope is not what we see in Bird. He makes me think of St. Augustine's description of hope. Hope has 2 beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and the courage to make sure they do not remain the same. Bird is angry at the way things are, and he acts to put things right. Anger is usually understood as a negative emotion, not something one would describe as a beautiful daughter, loved and appreciated. There are lots of things going on in the world we are living in that make many of us angry. There is the fact of climate change, for one thing, and we all know that many people in our own city are suffering from homelessness and hunger. And we're all too aware of ongoing wars in many places around the world. But anger on its own is no use. As many of you know, over the last 15 months, it is the conflict in Gaza which has weighed most heavily on me. Over the years, I have campaigned on many issues, but none have caused me so much pain. I have been studying the history of the conflict in Palestine for around 20 years. I have read countless books and articles on the subject, and I get very angry about the way this is misrepresented in the media and how the world continues to turn a blind eye to the horrific suffering of the Palestinian people. This anger is destructive, and without courage, can easily turn to despair. And I know I lack the courage to join in with actions which could lead to imprisonment, like the people who've been locked up for months now after daring to disrupt the production of parts of drones or planes which are used to kill. On days when there has been some particularly disturbing news from Gaza, I really struggle with a mixture of emotions: anger, grief, and frustration. But if this is all I have, perhaps I should just look away, stop looking at distressing images, and get on with my life. But I fear that would end in despair. I think hope can also be described as light at the end of the tunnel. There is a verse in John's Gospel which reads, "Light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has never overcome it." So I looked for that light. I found an article in Al Jazeera where the writer, who for over a year had been reporting daily on the horrors he sees around him in Palestine, confessed that he had come to believe that hope is a cockeyed fantasy. He had begun to despair. Then he came across the Christmas sermon of the Lutheran pastor of the Church of the Holy Nativity in Bethlehem, the Reverend Munter Isaac, and he found a reason to hope. He writes that in order to assure his listeners, believers or not, that hope exists and persists and cannot be extinguished by the purveyors of death and destruction, the Reverend Isaac talks about the resistance of the Palestinian people, their smooth. This is part of that sermon. It has been a time of resilience and even beauty. I think of all the heroes in Gaza, the doctors, the medics, the nurses, the first responders, the volunteers. Yes, the loss is enormous, but we have not lost our faith and our collective humanity. This is the beauty I'm talking about. To succumb to despair is a betrayal of humanity. Resistance can take many forms, but if it's going to succeed, it must be propelled by hope. There must be a light at the end of the tunnel. There was an article in The Guardian recently, you may have read it. It's about Osama Kassu, who has created a brand of cola, Gaza Cola, which he sells to raise enough money to rebuild a hospital. Al-Karama Hospital has been reduced to rubble. Kassu chose this hospital because it is small and he says it won't cost a lot of money to rebuild. How much? He doesn't know. When will it happen? He doesn't know. But, he says, we are allowed to have our imagination. We have to dream, otherwise we can't live. We live in hope or we die in despair. He's already looking out for the best medical equipment and designs, even down to the design of the lights. And in the meantime, a field hospital has been built using parachutes left behind from the airdrops of aid. Kassu fled Palestine after being shot, imprisoned, and tortured. But he has not given up hope. He has not lost his humanity. In a scruffy cafe next to Archway Station in North London, hope is kept alive as Fatan hand makes chocolate, which she sells to raise funds for her people in Gaza. Hope in a can of cola and a bar of chocolate. Reverend Isaac again. We must not rest or grow weary. To do so is to not only abandon the people of Gaza, but our own humanity. This is why we must continue talking about Gaza and the systemic oppression and killing until it stops. Everyone hopes this fragile ceasefire will last and that can be a step on the path to justice and a real peace for all who live in that troubled land. To that end, I live in hope. Talking about Gaza is not always easy. It's easier to join in a demonstration or a letter writing group where you share the space with fellow activists. It takes more courage to speak up on your own, and I want to thank you for listening to me this morning. I'm going to finish with a poem written by a much-loved and respected professor of English literature at the Islamic University of Gaza, Rafat Alaria. He wrote this poem for his young daughter during the bombardment of Gaza in 2014. He was killed in December 2023, and sadly, his daughter was killed soon after. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad, who left in a blaze and bid no one farewell, not even his flesh, not even himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale. Amen.
Thanks so much for your heartfelt sharing, Patricia. Time for one last hymn now, and very appropriately, it's on your hymn sheets, The World Needs Love. I think the first line of it, well, the world needs love, so many hearts are hurting. So let's sing that with feeling this morning.
Praise
So just time for a few announcements now. Thanks to Ramona for tech hosting and Sherry for co-hosting online. Thanks ever so much to Patricia for her reflection and indeed for suggesting this topic. Thanks to Abby and Andrew for lovely music today. I know we've got a treat yet to come. And to Benj for supporting our singing as ever. Thanks to Juliet for greeting, and I see that Marianne has gone to put the kettle on for coffee. If you're here in person, do hang around for a chat. We like to get to know you, and there's cake, if that's an incentive to stay. Victoria Sponge today. Tonight and Friday at 7 o'clock, we've got our Heart and Soul online contemplative spiritual gathering. This week's theme is disappointment. I don't think it will be as depressing a session as that might make it sound. It's a good way to get to know each other, to reflect on what's going on in our lives and the state of the world, and to explore all these themes. Wednesday night, we've got the poetry group here in person at 7 o'clock. That's a space to share and talk about poems, other people or your own. Have a word with Brian if you're coming along to that, and let him know what you plan to bring. Looking a bit further ahead, Sonia will be running her Nia dance class here Friday lunchtime. On Sunday, we've got yoga with Hannah, that's free of charge. And I am very pleased to let you know that community singing will be back on the 12th of February. That's 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. Do let me know if you're planning to come to that, because it is a bit subject to last minute changes, but I'm fairly confident that one is going to go ahead. If you haven't heard about this already, we're doing art, play, crafternoons once a month. We had our first one in January and it went down well. So the next one will be on Sunday the 16th. That's just a relaxed space where we get all the craft materials out of the cupboard and do what we like and have a chat, and it's a very friendly space. And the book club will be back on the 23rd when we'll be looking at Monsters, What Do We Do With Great Art by Bad People by Claire Dederer. All of our loan copies have gone now, but if you really want to come along and you're struggling to access the book, have a word and I'll see what I can do. Next week we'll be back here at 11 o'clock for a service titled Other Loves. It's kind of an anti-Valentine's service. Details of all these activities are on the back of your order of service. You can take that away with you. They're also in the Friday email. If you haven't yet signed up for the mailing list, that is the best way to keep in touch with what we're doing. Or you can take a copy of the newsletter. We've still got a few of the current one left. The new one will be out in a week or so. We've very much got a life beyond Sunday morning, so do what you can to look out for each other, keep in touch and nurture those supportive connections. So just time for our closing words and closing music. These closing words are based on something that's said by Howard Zinn on the subject of hope. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage and kindness. What we choose to emphasise in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. For the future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, that itself is a marvellous victory. So may it be so, for the greater good of all. Amen.